5 minutes before I walked out to meet the chief judge, my mother texted to say they were too tired from my sister's wedding to make it, claiming it was just a government thing anyway. They thought I was becoming a clerk, unaware I was about to become the youngest federal judge in the district. They also didn't know the man paying for their spa day would soon be dragged into my courtroom in handcuffs. I took the oath alone. My name is Ruby Bryant. I am 35 years old, and for the last 10 minutes, I have been staring at my reflection in the full-length mirror of the holding room at the Riverside Federal Complex. The woman looking back at me seems taller than I remember, likely due to the heavy black robe draping from my shoulders to the floor. It is not just a garment, it feels like armor, woven from synthetic silk and the weight of 200 years of judicial history. The air conditioning in the room is set to 65 degrees, a temperature designed to keep nerves cool and sweat at bay, but I feel a different kind of chill settling into the marrow of my bones. The room is silent except for the low hum of the ventilation system and the aggressive, insect-like buzzing of my phone against the mahogany side table. It has been vibrating for the last 4 minutes. I should not look. I know I should not look. A wiser version of myself, perhaps the version that existed before the last 48 hours, would have left the device in my locker, disconnected from the world outside this sanctuary of law. But the daughter in me, the part of my brain that still craves the dopamine hit of validation from people who have never understood me, reaches out. My hand hovers over the screen. I tell myself I am looking for a congratulations text. I tell myself I am looking for a message saying they landed early, that they are rushing through security, that they might be late, but they are coming. I pick it up. The screen illuminates my face with a harsh, artificial light. There are no missed calls. There are no frantic texts about traffic or flight delays. There is only a notification from the family group chat, a digital space pretentiously titled, The Bryant's Legacy. I unlock the phone. The first thing I see is a photograph. It is high resolution, bright, and sickeningly cheerful. It was taken in landscape mode, capturing the panoramic view of the Azure Cliffs Resort. The ocean behind them is a perfect, filtered turquoise. In the foreground, 4 people are crowded around a table laden with what looks like $500 worth of shellfish and crystal flutes of champagne. There is my younger sister, Simone. She is glowing, her skin bronzed, her smile wide and victorious. She is wearing a white sundress that likely cost more than my first car. Next to her is Trevor Langford, her new husband, the man with the venture capital firm and the smile that never quite reaches his eyes. He is holding a magnum of champagne like a trophy, and flanking them, looking happier than I have seen them in 20 years, are my parents, Calvin and Loretta Bryant. My father is wearing a linen shirt that is unbuttoned 1 notch too low, holding a cigar. My mother is laughing at something Trevor has evidently just said, her hand resting possessively on her son-in-law's shoulder. They look like a spread in a lifestyle magazine. They look like people without a care in the world. Then comes the text message. It is not in the group chat. It is a direct message from my mother, sent 2 minutes ago. I read it once, then I read it again. I feel the blood drain from my face, leaving me lightheaded. Don't wait at the airport. The message reads, we are too tired from the wedding festivities to make the flight. Trevor treated us to a full spa package at the resort to help us recover. It is too good to pass up. Besides, we figured it is just a government thing anyway. We will celebrate when you visit for Thanksgiving. Love, Mom. I stare at the words until they blur. Just a government thing. 12 years. It has been 12 years since I started law school. 12 years of missing holidays to study for finals. 7 years of working 80-hour weeks at the firm to build my reputation. 3 years of vetting by the FBI, where agents interviewed every neighbor I have ever had since I was 18. 6 months of Senate confirmation hearings where my entire life was dissected on national television. To them, this is the DMV. To them, I am standing in line to renew a driver's license or file a tax return. They think I am becoming a clerk. They think I am pushing paper. They do not know that in exactly 8 minutes, I am about to become the youngest federal judge in the history of this district. They do not know that the President of the United States signed my commission this morning. They chose a spa treatment. I do not know how much a spa package at Azure Cliffs costs. Maybe $300 a person, maybe $500. That is the price tag they put on the defining moment of my life. They weighed my achievement against a hot stone massage and a glass of free cucumber water. And I lost. My thumb hovers over the keyboard. I want to scream at her. I want to type out a paragraph detailing exactly what a federal judgeship means. I want to tell her that senators are sitting in the other room waiting for me. I want to tell her that Trevor, their golden ticket, is a fraud. Though at this moment, that is only a suspicion in the back of my legal mind. A gut feeling I have ignored for the sake of peace. But I do not. If I argue, I validate their ignorance. If I beg, I confirm that I am still the child begging for scraps from their table. I type 2 words. Rest well. I press send. I watch the small status indicator change from sent to delivered. I do not wait for it to change to read. I hold the power button on the side of my phone. The screen goes black. The buzzing stops. The connection is severed. I slide the phone into the deep pocket of my robe. It feels heavy, like a stone. But as I let go of it, I feel a strange, cold lightness spreading through my chest. It is the feeling of a tether snapping. There is a sharp rap on the heavy oak door. It opens before I can answer, and a man steps in. It is Deputy Marshal Vance. He's a large man, built like a linebacker, with a shaved head and eyes that usually scan a room for threats. He has been assigned to my detail for the transition. He pauses at the door, his posture shifting instantly from casual to rigid attention. He looks at me, not as Ruby, the woman who was just rejected by her mother via text message, but as the entity I am about to become. "All set, Your Honor," he asks. The title hangs in the air. Your Honor, my father calls me Ruby Girl when he wants to borrow money, or the lawyer when he is mocking my career choices to his friends. My mother calls me Honey in a tone that suggests she pities my lack of a husband. Neither of them has ever used a word that implies respect. Marshal Vance does not know me. To him, I am the institution, and in this moment, his professional deference feels more like love than anything I have received from my own bloodline in 3 decades. "I am ready, Marshal," I say. My voice surprises me. It is steady. It is an octave lower than usual. It is not the voice of a daughter. "The Chief Judge is waiting," he says, holding the door open. "And the gallery is full. Standing room only." I nod and step past him into the hallway. The floor is polished terrazzo, and the click of my heels echoes sharply against the marble walls. We walk in silence. Every step takes me further away from the resort in California and closer to the bench. The corridor is lined with portraits of past judges. Serious men with gray hair and stern expressions. I am walking into their ranks. I am 35, female, and alone, but I am walking into their ranks. We reach the double doors of the ceremonial courtroom. I can hear the murmur of the crowd on the other side. It sounds like the ocean, a low, rolling roar of hundreds of conversations. Marshal Vance puts his hand on the brass handle. He looks at me one last time. "Showtime," he whispers. He pulls the door open. The bailiff's voice booms out, cutting through the noise. "All rise!" The sound of 300 people standing up simultaneously is like a sudden gust of wind. Chairs scrape against the floor. Fabric rustles. The murmur dies instantly, replaced by a profound, expectant silence. I walk in. The room is magnificent. The ceiling is 20 feet high, adorned with intricate plasterwork. The walls are paneled in dark walnut. The seal of the United States hangs enormous in gold behind the bench, but I do not look at the architecture. I look at the people. The gallery is packed. There are partners from my old law firm. There are law clerks, local politicians, the mayor, and reporters with their cameras positioned in the designated media box. There are federal agents I have worked with on task forces. There are people I went to law school with, looking at me with a mixture of pride and envy. And then, I see the front row. It is the prime real estate of the courtroom, directly in front of the bench, closer than anyone else. There are 4 seats separated from the rest of the gallery by a velvet rope. On each seat, there is a piece of heavy cream cardstock printed with elegant black lettering. Reserved for family. They are empty. The emptiness is violent. In a room where people are shoulder to shoulder, standing against the back wall, craning their necks to see, those 4 empty chairs scream. They are a void, a black hole in the middle of my triumph. I can feel the eyes of the room shifting. They look at me, then they look at the empty seats, then they look back at me. I see a reporter from the local paper lean over and whisper something to his photographer. The photographer adjusts his lens, zooming in. I know exactly what picture will run on the front page tomorrow. It will not be my face. It will be the gap in the front row. For a second, just one singular second, I feel like I might vomit. The humiliation is physical. It burns in my throat. I imagine the whispers. Where are her parents? Does she have no one? Is she estranged? What is wrong with her family? I falter in my step. My hand grips the fabric of my robe. Then, I think of the photo. I think of the champagne. I think of the $200 spa treatment. I think of Trevor's smug smile and my father's unbuttoned shirt. They are not missing this because of a tragedy. They are missing this because they simply did not think it mattered enough to get on a plane. The shame evaporates. It is replaced by something colder, harder, and infinitely more useful. I do not need them. I have never needed them. I got into law school on my own. I paid my tuition with loans I'm still servicing. I stayed up for 3 nights in a row to make partner. I sat through the FBI interviews alone. I sat before the Senate Judiciary Committee alone. I am not a victim of their neglect. I am a survivor of it. I lift my chin. I lock my expression into a mask of absolute, impenetrable calm. I look directly at the photographer, and I do not blink. Take the picture. I think. Let the world see exactly who they are. I continue walking. I bypass the clerk's station and ascend the 3 steps to the bench. The chief judge, an 80-year-old man named Harrison, who has seen everything, is waiting for me holding the Bible. He looks at the empty seats, then looks at me. His eyes soften with a momentary, grandfatherly pity. "Are we waiting for anyone, Ruby?" he asks quietly, off the microphone. I look him in the eye. "No, Chief Judge," I say. "We are all present." He nods, understanding. He opens the book. I place my left hand on the leather cover. It is warm. My right hand goes up. The sleeve of my robe falls back. My hand is steady. It is perfectly still. "Repeat after me," he says. Ruby Bryant. I begin. My voice hits the microphone and amplifies, filling the cavernous room. It sounds powerful. It sounds like thunder trapped in a box. It bounces off the walnut walls and settles over the crowd. "Do solemnly swear that I will administer justice without respect to persons," I continue. "Without respect to persons." I look at the empty chairs one last time. "And do equal right to the poor and to the rich," I say. "To the rich." The words taste prophetic. "And that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as United States District Judge under the Constitution and laws of the United States. So help me God," the Chief Judge finishes. "So help me God," I repeat. The gavel is resting on the sound block in front of me. It is polished wood, heavy and scarred from use. I reach out and take it in my hand. It fits perfectly against my palm. The weight of it is grounding. I look out at the 300 strangers who showed up when my own blood did not. I am alone. Yes, but as my fingers close around the handle of the gavel, I realize that being alone means there is no one to hold me back. I am Ruby Bryant, and I am the law. To understand why I stood alone in that courtroom, you have to understand the economics of the Bryant household in Maple Crest, California. We were not poor, but we were terrified of being ordinary. My father, Calvin, viewed our family not as a biological unit, but as a small portfolio of assets that needed to be managed for maximum yield. And like any portfolio manager, he categorized his holdings early. I was the bond, safe, boring, reliable. I would mature slowly, pay out small dividends, and never crash. I did not require attention. Simone, my sister, was the speculative stock. She was volatile and high maintenance, but if she hit, the returns would be astronomical. The strategy was simple. I was expected to survive. Simone was expected to marry. I remember the day I received my acceptance letter to Jefferson Law School. It was a Tuesday in late April. The afternoon sun was cutting through the blinds in our kitchen, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I had run all the way from the mailbox, my heart hammering against my ribs, clutching the thick envelope that confirmed I was not just smart, but exceptional. I had been offered a near-full scholarship. I slapped the letter onto the granite countertop where my mother, Loretta, was chopping vegetables for a pot roast. "I got in," I said, breathless. "Jefferson, and they are covering 80% of the tuition." My mother paused. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and picked up the letter. She read it with the same level of enthusiasm one might give to a coupon for a discount on detergent. She did not smile. She pursed her lips, a gesture I had learned to interpret as mild disapproval masked as concern. "That is a lot of years of school. Ruby," she said, sliding the letter back to me. "3 more years. You will be 26 when you get out. That is getting up there." "It is law school, Mom," I said, my excitement faltering. "It is a career, a real one." I know, she sighed, returning to her carrots. "But be careful. Men do not like women who argue for a living. You get too sharp. You cut people. You might find yourself very successful and very lonely. Just do not let the books ruin your eyes. Squinting gives you wrinkles." That evening, when my father came home, the dynamic was reinforced. He looked at the acceptance letter, nodded once, and said, "Good, that saves me money. You can handle the living expenses yourself, right? You have that waitressing job." "Yes," I said. "I can work nights." "Good girl," he said, already turning away. "Ruby can always handle herself. We need to focus our resources where they are needed." Resources meant Simone. While I was picking up double shifts at a diner to pay for textbooks that cost $300 apiece, my parents were funneling thousands into Simone. It was an investment strategy. They paid for her teeth to be straightened with invisible aligners because metal braces were too middle class. They paid for a personal trainer because she needed to be toned, not skinny. They paid for her to attend a mediocre liberal arts college that was known less for its academics and more for the net worth of its student body. When I questioned it once, during a rare moment of anger over my student loan interest rates, my father looked at me with genuine confusion. "It is marketing, Ruby," he explained, as if I were a slow child. "You are selling a brain. Simone is selling a lifestyle. Her overhead is higher. If she lands a man with real money, the ROI, return on investment, covers us all. You will do fine, but Simone could change the trajectory of this family." The divide became a canyon during Sunday dinners. These were mandatory events where we were expected to perform the role of a happy family. I would sit there, exhausted from studying constitutional law for 14 hours straight, listening to Simone recount her week. Her stories were always about parties, weekend trips to Napa, or which fraternity was hosting a mixer. My parents hung on her every word. They analyzed her potential suitors like they were vetting mergers and acquisitions. "What about the boy from the yacht club?" my mother would ask, her fork hovering in the air. "The one with the last name Vanderwall." "He is okay," Simone would say, picking at her salad. "But he wants to be a poet," his dad cut him off. "Next," my father would grunt. "Poets do not pay mortgages. Waste of a good surname." Then they would turn to me, almost as an afterthought. "How is school?" my mother would ask. "I made law review," I said one evening, feeling a surge of pride I could not suppress. "It is the top 10% of the class. I get to edit the journal. It is a huge prerequisite for federal clerkships." The table went silent. My father chewed his steak thoughtfully. That means more reading, right? He asked. It means prestige, Dad. Sure, sure, smart, he said, waving his fork. But do not let it make you hard. Ruby, nobody likes a woman who thinks she is the smartest person in the room, even if she is. Before I could defend myself, Simone gasped. She held up her phone. Oh my God, she squealed. Trevor just texted me. Trevor Langford. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. It was electric. My law review accomplishment evaporated like steam. Langford, my father asked, sitting up straighter. As in Langford Ridge Capital. Yes, Simone beamed. He wants to take me to dinner, on a Tuesday. That is serious, right? That is very serious, my mother breathed, her eyes wide. Wear the red dress, the one we bought at Saks. I will book you a blowout for your hair tomorrow morning. I have a torts exam on Wednesday, I said quietly. I was going to ask if you could keep the noise down tomorrow night. Ruby, please, my mother snapped, not looking at me. This is Trevor Langford. Do not be selfish. This could be it. Trevor was the endgame. When he eventually started coming around, he was treated not as a guest, but as a visiting dignitary. He was 5 years older than Simone, worked in private equity, and drove a car that cost more than the balance of my student loans. He was loud, opinionated, and treated waiters with a casual disdain that made my skin crawl. But to Calvin and Loretta, he was a god. He would sit at our table, drinking my father's best scotch, and talk about leveraging assets and market disruptions. My father would nod along, repeating the buzzwords, desperate to sound like he belonged in the conversation. You know, Calvin, Trevor said once, leaning back in his chair. You have got a smart girl here, my father beamed, looking at Simone. No, Trevor laughed, pointing his glass at me. The lawyer, ferocious. I bet she shreds people apart. I looked up, surprised. It was the first time he had acknowledged me as a person and not furniture. My father's smile faltered. He looked at me, then back at Trevor, terrified that my lack of charm might spoil the deal. Ruby is efficient, my father said quickly. She has got the degrees, but Simone has the future. The sentence hung in the air. Ruby has degrees. Simone has the future. It was a complete summary of my existence in their eyes. My achievements were past tense. They were pieces of paper on a wall. Static, finite. But Simone was potential energy. Simone was the lottery ticket they were still scratching. I stopped talking about my work after that. I stopped trying to explain the intricacies of the cases I was studying or the internships I was securing. I realized that to them, my career was a hobby that paid the bills, while Simone's dating life was the family business. The final break, the moment I truly understood that I was walking this path alone, happened 2 years after I graduated. I was 28. I had landed a job as a junior prosecutor, a role that paid significantly less than private practice but offered the courtroom experience I craved. I had been assigned my first lead in a jury trial. It was a fraud case, not a massive one, but complex enough that the senior partners were watching. I was nervous. I wanted someone in my corner. I called my mother on a Sunday afternoon. Mom, I said, my trial starts on Tuesday. Opening statements are at 9 o'clock. It is open to the public. I was hoping you and Dad could come. Just for the morning. It would mean a lot to look back and see you there. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the rustle of fabric in the background. Tuesday, she asked. Oh, Ruby, we can't. Why, I asked. Dad is retired. You are home. It is a 40-minute drive. It is Simone's final fitting, she said, her voice tight with stress. For the wedding dress, the tailor is flying in from New York. We have to be there to make sure the lace lies flat. If it bunches up, the photos will be ruined. I gripped the phone tighter. Mom, it is a dress fitting. You have seen the dress 10 times. This is my first trial. This is my actual life. Do not be dramatic, she chided. The wedding is in 3 months. This is crunch time. Trevor's mother is going to be there, and we need to present a united front. We need to look like we belong in their world. I am asking you to come watch me do the thing I have worked my entire life to do, I said, my voice shaking. And we are supporting your sister. She shot back. Why do you always have to make it a competition? You have your job. You are fine. You are always fine. Simone needs us. I need you too, I whispered. We will come to the next one, she said, dismissively. When things settle down, just do a good job. Make sure you wear lipstick. You look washed out on camera. She hung up. I sat in my small apartment, surrounded by stacks of case files and evidence binders. I looked at the empty chair across from me. That Tuesday, I walked into the courtroom. I delivered my opening statement. I was sharp, I was articulate, and I was relentless. I did not wear lipstick. I wore a dark blue suit and a scowl that terrified the defense attorney. I won the case. When the verdict came down, I did not call them. I went to a bar alone, ordered a whiskey, and toasted myself in the mirror behind the bar. My father was right. In a way, I could handle myself, but he was wrong about the reason. It wasn't because I was naturally strong. It was because they had trained me, through years of neglect and dismissal, to realize that if I wanted applause, I would have to clap for myself. They placed their bets on Simone and Trevor Langford. They bought shares in a company that was built on smoke and mirrors. They did not realize that the steady, boring bond they had ignored was quietly accumulating compound interest. And now, years later, the market was about to correct itself. The call that changed my professional life came on a Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock. The sun was hitting the glass of my office window, creating a glare that made me squint. But I did not move to close the blinds. I was frozen. On the other end of the line was the White House counsel. The voice was calm, bureaucratic, and heavy with history. They told me that the president intended to nominate me to fill the vacancy on the United States District Court for the Riverside District. I remember thanking him. I remember hanging up the phone and staring at my hands. They were trembling. Not a subtle tremor, but a violent shaking that made my knuckles knock against the polished wood of my desk. This was it. This was the summit. In the legal world, there is no higher honor short of the Supreme Court. I was being handed the power to interpret the Constitution, to strip people of their liberty or protect their rights. For the rest of my natural life, I was 34 years old at the time of the call, and I had just been told that my name would be written into the history books. The silence in my office felt too big. It felt like a pressure chamber. I needed to release it. I needed to tell someone who would understand that the little girl who studied by flashlight under her covers had finally made it to the mountaintop. I picked up my phone again. My thumb hovered over the contact list. I should have called a mentor. I should have called my best friend from law school. I should have called the partner in the office next door. But the child in me, the one who was still starving, took over. I dialed my father. It rang 4 times. I almost hung up, thinking he might be busy. But then the line clicked open. "Make it quick, Ruby," my father said. There was no hello. The background noise was deafening. I could hear the distinct, heavy bass of a live jazz band, the clatter of silverware on china, and the roar of 100 conversations happening at once. It sounded expensive. It sounded like a party that had already been going on for 3 hours. "Dad," I said, my voice catching in my throat. "I need you to step outside for a second. I have news." "I cannot step outside," he said, his voice loud to compete with the music. "We are toasting. Trevor just ordered another round of Dom Perignon for the head table. Do you know how much a bottle of that stuff costs more than your first car?" "Dad, listen," I said, pressing the phone harder against my ear, trying to block out the noise of his world so he could hear mine. "I just got off the phone with the White House." There was a pause. The noise on his end did not stop, but his breathing shifted. "The White House?" he asked. "Like the IRS. Did you get audited? I told you that tax return looked complicated." "No, Dad," I said, closing my eyes. "The White House, the President's counsel, They are nominating me for a federal judgeship, the Riverside District Court. I waited. I held my breath. I waited for the gasp. I waited for the shout of joy. I waited for him to tell the room to be quiet because his daughter had just achieved the impossible. "Oh," he said. The word fell flat, like a wet towel dropping onto a tile floor. "A judge. Is that the promotion you were talking about last month?" "It is not a promotion, Dad," I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "It is an appointment. It is a lifetime seat. It is the federal bench. I will be one of the youngest judges in the country. It requires Senate confirmation." "Right, right," he said, and I could hear him distracted, his attention drifting away to something happening in the room. "So, it is a government job then. Good benefits. I assume pension." I felt a crack form in my chest. "It is not about the pension. It is about the jurisdiction. It is about—" "Look, Ruby," he interrupted, and his tone shifted to that patronizing cadence he used when he thought I was being overly emotional about my career. "You are making it sound like you were crowned Queen of England. It is a civil servant job. You wear a robe, you bang a hammer, you get a steady paycheck. It is safe. That is good for you. You like safe." "It is not safe," I whispered. "It is powerful." "You know what is powerful," he countered, his voice rising with excitement. "But not for me. What Trevor just did for your sister, that is power." I stared at the wall of my office. What did Trevor do? "He bought her a necklace," my father said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. "Vintage Cartier, from an auction in London. He had it flown in this morning by a courier, a private courier. Ruby, the thing is covered in diamonds. He put it on her neck in front of everyone." "That is nice, Dad," I said. "Nice," he laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Ruby, that necklace is appraised at $250,000. That is more than you make in a year. Isn't it? Hell, that is probably more than you will make in 2 years at this new government job." The number hit me like a physical slap. $250,000. He had memorized the price tag. He recited it with reverence, as if the dollar amount was a measure of Simone's soul. "It is a beautiful gesture," I said, my voice turning mechanical. "It is not a gesture," he corrected me. "It is a statement. That is what success looks like, Ruby. You are over there chasing titles, stressing yourself out, working until midnight to get a nod from some bureaucrats in Washington. Meanwhile, Simone is standing here wearing $250,000 around her neck, and she did not have to file a single brief to get it." The air in my office felt suddenly thin. I could not breathe. "Are you saying," I asked slowly, "that her marriage is a bigger achievement than my judgeship?" "I am saying," he said, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, as if he were teaching me a hard truth about the world, "that you picked the gavel, and Simone picked the man. And if you look at the balance sheet, Ruby, that is the real win. She is set for life. You are going to be working until you are 70. There it was. The thesis of the Bryant family legacy. Labor was for fools. Dependency was the goal. If you had to work for your power, you had already lost." I looked down at the hand that had been trembling with joy moments ago. Now, it was perfectly still. The shaking had stopped, replaced by a cold, heavy numbness. "I see," I said. "Anyway," he said, his attention snapping back to the party as the music swelled. "We are busy. The rehearsal dinner is tonight, and your mother is losing her mind over the floral arrangements. When is this swearing-in thing next week?" "Next month," I said, "but the confirmation hearings are first. I will send you the dates. If you are too busy with the wedding—" "I understand. I can go alone." I threw the line out, a final, desperate test. "Tell me you will be there. Tell me you will make time." He laughed. "You go alone everywhere, Ruby. You are used to being independent. You thrive on it. We will try to make it. But honestly, with the honeymoon planning and Trevor taking us to the villa in Italy afterwards, the schedule is tight. Just send us the pictures. We will frame one for the hallway." "Okay," I said. "I will send pictures." "Hold on," he shouted, turning away from the phone. "Trevor is standing up. He is popping the bottle." I heard the cheer of the crowd rise up like a wave. I heard the distinct, sharp pop of a cork flying across a room. I heard my mother shrieking with delight. "Here is to the happy couple," my father roared, his voice distant now, directed at the room, not at me. "To the Langfords." "Dad," I said. The line went dead. He had not even said goodbye. He had hung up to clap. I slowly lowered the phone from my ear. The silence of my office rushed back in. But it felt different now. Before, it was the silence of anticipation. Now, it was the silence of a tomb. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city skyline. I could see the federal courthouse from here. It was a massive, imposing structure of granite and glass, a fortress of law. That was my future. That was my home. And in that moment, standing there with the dial tone still echoing in my mind, I realized something profound. My father was wrong. He thought the necklace was power because it cost money. He thought Trevor was a king because he could write a check. He thought I was a servant because I drew a salary from the taxpayers. He had no idea what a federal judge could do. He had no idea that the man buying vintage Cartier and flying private couriers was playing a dangerous game with liquidity. He saw the flash. He did not see the leverage. I did not know it for a fact yet, not legally, but my instincts. Honed by a decade of prosecuting financial crimes, pricked at the back of my neck. People who spent money that loudly were usually trying to drown out the sound of something breaking. I looked at the phone in my hand. I could text him. I could explain that a federal judge has the power to sign search warrants. I could explain that I would have the authority to freeze assets, to compel testimony, to send U.S. Marshals to knock on doors at 6 o'clock in the morning. I could explain that while Simone's necklace was worth $250,000, the pen I would use to sign sentences was priceless because it commanded the full weight of the United States government. But I did not. I put the phone down on my desk. Let them enjoy the champagne. Let them toast to the real win. Let them think I am just a glorified clerk pushing papers in a basement. I would not correct them. I would not beg for their attendance. I would not try to explain the magnitude of my life to people who measured worth in carats. I would let them stay in the dark. Because when the lights finally came on, when the music stopped and the hangover set in, I wanted to be the one holding the switch. I sat back down in my leather chair. I picked up a pen. I pulled a fresh legal pad toward me. And for the first time in my life, I did not write a to-do list for my family. I did not write down flight times for my parents or gift ideas for my sister. I wrote down the date of my swearing in, and next to the line for guests, I wrote a single word, none. Then, I went back to work. The heavy double doors of the ceremonial courtroom swung open, and for a moment, the only thing I could register was the blinding white flare of camera flashes. It was like stepping into a lightning storm. The air inside the room was cool and smelled faintly of floor wax and old paper, a scent that had always comforted me, but today it felt sterile. I stepped across the threshold, the master of ceremonies, a court clerk with a baritone voice that seemed to vibrate in the floorboards, stepped up to the podium. "All rise," he commanded. "The United States District Court for the Riverside District is now in session, the Honorable Chief Judge Harrison presiding. And presenting for the administration of the oath, the Honorable Ruby Bryant." He paused for effect, letting the title hang in the air before adding the detail that the press had been running with all week. The youngest federal judge in the history of the district. The applause was polite, restrained, and professional. It washed over me as I began the long walk down the center aisle. To my left and right, the pews were packed. I saw faces I recognized, law school rivals who now looked at me with calculated respect, senior partners from my old firm who had once asked me to fetch coffee, and local politicians who were there to be seen. But my eyes were drawn magnetically, inevitably, to the front row. The layout of the courtroom was designed to honor the support system of the appointee. Directly in front of the bench, closer than the press box, closer than the jury box, were 4 high-backed chairs upholstered in a deep, royal blue velvet. They were the best seats in the house. They were reserved for the people who had sacrificed, the people who had nurtured, the people who were supposed to witness the return on their investment. On each seat, a thick cream-colored card was tinted. The calligraphy was elegant and black, reserved for Bryant family. Empty, 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 empty. They were not just vacant chairs. In that crowded room, they were a crater. The velvet looked pristine, untouched, the pile of the fabric smooth because no anxious parent was shifting their weight on it. No proud sister was leaning forward to take a video. I kept walking. My pace was steady, a rhythm I had practiced in my head. Left, right, do not speed up, do not look down. As I approached the void, I saw a photographer from the Associated Press. He was a veteran, a man I had seen at high-profile trials for a decade. He knew a story when he saw one. He did not aim his lens at my face. He did not aim at the flag. He dropped to one knee, angling his camera low. I heard the rapid-fire shutter of his camera. Click, 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 click. He was framing the shot. Me, in my black robe, walking in profile past the 4 empty blue chairs with the reserved signs clearly visible in the foreground. I knew, with a cold and absolute certainty, that this image would define the day. It would not be a picture of triumph. It would be a picture of isolation. It would go viral before the ceremony was even over. I felt a phantom heat on the side of my face as I passed them. It was the heat of humiliation, trying to rise up my neck, trying to make me blush, but I suffocated it. I imagined the spa at Azure Cliffs. I imagined my mother's face covered in a mud mask, my father holding a glass of scotch, laughing at a joke Trevor made. They were comfortable. They were relaxed. I would not give them the satisfaction of my embarrassment. I reached the front of the room and ascended the steps to the bench. Chief Judge Harrison was waiting for me. He looked frail but dignified, his robe swallowing his thin frame. He smiled at me, a genuine, warm expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He leaned in close, covering the microphone with his hand so only I could hear. "You look ready, Ruby," he whispered. Then, his eyes flickered over my shoulder, scanning the front row, expecting to see beaming parents waving back. His smile faltered. He looked confused. "Your parents. Surely they must be proud today." He was giving me an out. He was assuming they were stuck in traffic, or perhaps seated in the back due to a mix-up. He could not conceive of a world where a mother and father would voluntarily miss this. I looked him in the eye. I did not whisper. "They are resting," I said. The chief judge blinked. "Resting." "Yes," I said, my voice flat. "It has been a very exhausting week for them." He pulled back, unsure how to process the information. He looked at the empty chairs again, then back at me, and a shadow of pity crossed his face. I hated it. I did not want his pity. I wanted his oath. "Shall we proceed?" I asked. He cleared his throat, regaining his composure. "Yes, of course." He gestured to the Bible resting on the podium. It was an old King James version, its leather cover worn soft by the hands of 100 judges before me. Beside it lay a copy of the Constitution. I placed my left hand on the Constitution. I did not choose the Bible. I chose the law. The Bible dealt with forgiveness and family, and I was in no mood for either. The Constitution was a contract. It was a set of rules that did not care if you were popular or pretty or married to a venture capitalist. It only cared if you were right. I raised my right hand. The sleeve of my robe fell back, revealing my bare wrist. No Cartier watch, no diamond bracelet, just skin and bone and pulse. Ruby Bryant," I said. My voice filled the room. It was not the voice of the girl who asked for permission. It was the voice of the state. "Do solemnly swear that I will administer justice without respect to persons, and do equal right to the poor and to the rich." As I spoke the words, a strange sensation washed over me. The emptiness in the front row ceased to be a source of pain and transformed into a source of clarity. If those chairs were full, if my father was sitting there, he would be critiquing my posture. If my mother was there, She would be signaling for me to fix my hair. If Simone was there, she would be checking her phone. Their absence was a gift. It was a vacuum, and in a vacuum, there is no resistance. And that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me. I looked out at the sea of strangers. They were watching me with intensity. They saw a woman standing alone, and they interpreted it as strength. They did not see a rejected daughter. They saw a figure of independence. So help me God. "Congratulations, Judge Bryant," Harrison said, his voice booming. The room erupted. The applause was louder this time, sustained and genuine. I shook the chief judge's hand. I shook the hands of the other judges who had lined up behind me. Then came the part I had dreaded most. The photos, usually. At this point in the ceremony, the marshal would wave the family forward. The parents would come up to the bench, the spouse would stand by the side, and the flashbulbs would pop for the official portrait. I stood by the seal of the United States. The photographer, the same one who had taken the picture of the empty chairs, stepped forward. He lowered his camera for a second, looking around the room, waiting for the cue to organize the group shot. He looked at the marshal. The marshal looked at me. The room went quiet. The applause died down, and the awkwardness that had been simmering under the surface boiled over. Everyone was looking at the empty blue chairs. The question hung in the air, thick and suffocating. A reporter in the front row, a woman from the Legal Times who was known for her directness, stood up. She did not shout, but in the silence, her voice carried clearly. "Judge Bryant," she said, "is your family unable to make it today?" It was a breach of protocol. You do not ask personal questions during a swearing-in, but the visual was too jarring to ignore. I looked at her. I could have lied. I could have said there was a medical emergency. I could have said their flight was canceled. I could have protected their reputation one last time, playing the dutiful daughter who covers up the cracks in the family foundation. But I remembered the text. Just a government thing. I stepped to the microphone. I did not smile. "Sometimes," I said, my voice echoing off the mahogany walls, "you stand alone." I let the sentence land. I saw the reporter scribbling furiously in her notebook. "The oath," I continued, "is still the same. The law does not require an audience to be valid, and neither do I." The reporter stopped writing. She looked up at me, and I saw a flash of admiration in her eyes. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said quietly. Sitting down, the photographer raised his camera again. "Just you then, Judge?" he asked. "Just me," I said. He lifted the lens. I looked directly into the black circle of the glass. I did not look at the people in the room. I looked through the lens, across the miles, across the time zones, straight into the imagined screen of a smartphone at the Azure Cliffs Resort. I knew they would see this. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, someone would send it to them. Someone would show them the news. I hardened my eyes. I made sure my expression was not one of sadness, but of absolute, terrifying competence. "Look closely," I thought, projecting the words with every ounce of my will. "Look at what you missed. Look at what you dismissed. You thought I was nothing. Now I am the one holding the hammer." The flash went off. Pop! It blinded me for a tenth of a second, leaving a purple afterimage in my vision. I turned to the bench. My gavel was waiting for me on the sound block. I had not touched it yet. This was the ceremonial closing. I picked it up. The wood was cool and smooth. It felt like an extension of my arm. The room was silent, waiting for the sound that would dismiss them. I raised the gavel. I did not bring it down gently. I did not tap it. I swung it with the full force of my shoulder, driving it down toward the block with a violence that startled even me. Crack. The sound was like a pistol shot. It was sharp, final, and absolute. It was the sound of a session ending. But in my head, it was the sound of a cord being cut. It was the sound of the bridge to Maple Crest collapsing into the sea. It was the sound of Ruby, the daughter, dying, and Judge Bryant being born. I left the gavel resting on the block. I did not look back at the empty chairs. I gathered my robes and walked toward the judge's chambers, leaving the empty room behind me. 3,000 miles away from the solemnity of the Riverside Federal Complex. The sun was beating down on the Azure Cliffs Resort with the kind of aggressive brightness that wealthy people mistake for happiness. It was one of those places where the sand was raked every hour. The water was chemically balanced to a perfect turquoise, and the air smelled of coconut oil and credit card debt. My family was sitting at a prime cabana near the infinity pool. The table in front of them was groaning under the weight of a seafood tower that stood 3 tiers high. There were oysters from cold waters, lobster tails the size of forearms, and king crab legs that had been cracked open by staff so that my sister, Simone, would not have to risk chipping her manicure. Trevor Langford sat at the head of the table. He was wearing designer sunglasses that cost more than a mortgage payment and a linen shirt unbuttoned to show off a chest that had seen more tanning beds than gyms. He held court with the casual arrogance of a man who believes the world is a vending machine that only accepts his currency. "More champagne," Trevor shouted, snapping his fingers at a passing waiter. He did not look at the man. He just pointed at the empty magnum of Dom Perignon. "And keep them coming. We are celebrating freedom." My father, Calvin, laughed. It was a loud, wet sound, greased by alcohol and the thrill of proximity to money. He leaned back in his teak chair, chewing on a cigar he had not bothered to light. "That is right," Calvin said, gesturing grandly with his glass. "Freedom, freedom from the grind. You know, right now, at this exact second, poor Ruby is probably standing in some dusty government hallway, waiting for a bureaucrat to stamp a piece of paper. My mother, Loretta, was applying a fresh layer of tanning oil to her legs. She paused to giggle. "Oh, stop it. Cal, you make it sound so dreary. I'm sure they have air conditioning, but honestly, can you imagine wearing that heavy black robe on a day like this? It must be suffocating." She always did like to make things hard for herself. "She likes the rules," Simone chimed in, picking up a shrimp with delicate fingers. "Ruby loves telling people what to do. Being a judge is perfect for her. She can just sit there and be grumpy and get paid for it, but it is so small, you know? It is just local stuff, parking tickets and things." "Federal, actually," Trevor corrected, but his tone was dismissive. "But yeah, public sector. Fixed income. You trade your soul for a pension and a plaque on the wall. No upside, no leverage. Look at this." He pulled a black metal credit card from his pocket and tossed it onto the table. It landed with a heavy, authoritative clatter next to the lobster shells. "That is leverage," Trevor said. "Limitless. I could buy this hotel right now if I wanted to deal with the paperwork." Calvin stared at the card like it was a holy relic. He reached out and touched the corner of it with his index finger. "Incredible," my father breathed. "You have done well, son. You have done very well. This is what I always wanted for my girls. Security, real security." "Ruby has security," Loretta said, waving her hand. "But she does not have style. That is the difference. Simone has style." Simone preened, adjusting her bikini top. "I wish she was here, though, just so she could see what she is missing. She probably thinks we are terrible for skipping her little ceremony." "We are not skipping it," Calvin said, pouring himself more champagne. "We are prioritizing Family Mental Health Day. Besides, she is a big girl. She went to law school alone. She can take an oath alone. Cheers to that." They clinked glasses, the crystal ringing out in the hot afternoon air. They were drunk on sunshine and self-satisfaction, completely unaware that the ground beneath them was made of paper. Then, Trevor's phone buzzed. It was lying face up on the table, next to the black card. The screen lit up. It was not a text from a broker. It was not a congratulatory message from a partner. It was a text from a number Trevor did not have saved, but one he evidently recognized. "We know about the offshore transfers. The Riverline Federal Commission is opening a file on Monday, $2 million by sunset. Or we send the PDFs to the district attorney. Tick-tock." Trevor went rigid. The smile froze on his face, turning into a grotesque rictus. The color drained out of his cheeks so fast it looked like a magic trick, leaving him pale beneath his expensive tan. His hand, which had been reaching for his glass, spasmed, knocking a fork onto the patio tiles. "Trevor," Simone asked, looking up. "Babe, you okay? You look like you saw a ghost." Trevor snatched the phone off the table. He flipped it over, hiding the screen. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The Riverline Federal Commission, the RFC, they were the watchdogs. If they had a file, the game was over. Unless he could pay, unless he could plug the hole before Monday morning, he needed cash, fast, liquid cash, not tied up in equity, not locked in escrow. He needed $2 million of stupid money. He looked at Calvin. He looked at Loretta. He saw the way they looked at him with hungry, desperate adoration. They were not just his in-laws. They were marks. He forced a laugh. It sounded jagged, like glass in a blender, but they were too drunk to notice. "Ghost?" Trevor choked out. "No ghost. Just a deal. A massive deal. My guys in New York just messaged me. It is huge. It is overwhelming." "Good news?" Calvin asked, leaning in, smelling blood in the water. Another windfall. Trevor wiped a bead of cold sweat from his upper lip. He needed to distract them. He needed to get them away from the pool, away from the quiet, and into a chaotic environment where he could manipulate them. "The best news," Trevor lied. "But you know what? It is too hot out here. I am feeling generous. Simone, baby, didn't you say you wanted that bag? The Birkin." Simone gasped. She dropped her shrimp. "The Himalayan one. In the boutique lobby." "Get it," Trevor said, standing up abruptly. His legs felt shaky. "Get two. Loretta. You need one too. Calvin, I saw a watch in the display case. Patek Philippe. Let's go. My treat. Come on. Let's move." "Oh my God!" Simone shrieked, jumping up. "Trevor, you are crazy, Mom. Come on." Loretta scrambled to gather her things, her face flushed with greed. "Calvin, leave the cigar. We are going shopping." Trevor herded them toward the resort's main building like cattle. He needed to keep them moving. He needed to keep the dopamine flowing. He knew that if he bought them things, they would feel indebted, and once they felt indebted, they would open their checkbooks. They swept into the high-end boutique corridor of the resort. Trevor slapped the black card onto the counter of the luxury leather goods store. He bought the bags. He bought the watch. He bought scarves and belts and sunglasses. He spent $80,000 in 12 minutes. The transaction went through. He breathed a sigh of relief. The credit line was still active. They had not frozen him yet. "Trevor, son," Calvin said, admiring the heavy gold watch on his wrist. "You are too much. Really. This is generosity on another level." "It is nothing," Trevor said, his eyes darting around the store, checking for federal agents that weren't there yet. "Actually, Cal, since we are talking, this deal I just got texted about, it is sensitive, extremely limited." He lowered his voice. He guided Calvin and Loretta to a quiet corner of the boutique, away from Simone, who was spinning in front of a mirror with her new bag. "What kind of deal?" Calvin asked. His voice hushed. "Bridge funding," Trevor whispered. "Tech sector. Pre-IPO. We need to move liquid capital across a secure ledger to unlock a merger. It is a 48-hour window. The returns are aggressive." "How aggressive?" Loretta asked, clutching her $20,000 bag. 200%, Trevor said. He pulled the number out of thin air. "Guaranteed, but I can only offer it to family. I am closing the round tonight. I need to wire the funds by 5 o'clock. Calvin's eyes glazed over. He did not see a risk. He saw a shortcut. He saw a way to finally be the rich man he had always pretended to be. He saw a way to stop looking at price tags. 200%, Calvin repeated. In 48 hours. The market is inefficient, Trevor babbled, using words that meant nothing. We are exploiting an arbitrage gap, but I need cash. I cannot use my institutional funds because of regulatory blackout periods. I need personal capital. How much? Calvin asked. As much as you can liquidate, Trevor said. He put a hand on Calvin's shoulder. He squeezed it hard. Cal, this is it. This is how I bought the house in the Hamptons. This is the inner circle. I am inviting you in. Calvin looked at Loretta. They exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated avarice. This was their chance to catch up to the Langfords. This was their chance to be players. We have the retirement accounts, Loretta whispered, and the equity line on the house in Maple Crest. We just refinanced. Do it, Trevor urged. Call the bank. Wire it to my personal holding LLC. I will have it back to you with the profit on Tuesday. Okay, Calvin said. His hands were shaking, not with fear, but with excitement. Okay, let's do it. Let's be rich. Trevor exhaled. He felt a wave of nausea. It was evil. He knew it was evil. He was taking their house. He was taking their old age. But the alternative was prison. The alternative was the RFC tearing him apart. He chose himself. Let's go to the bar, Trevor said, his throat dry. We need a drink to seal this. Then you make the call. They moved to the resort bar, a sleek, open-air lounge overlooking the ocean. The mood was electric. Simone was taking selfies with her bag. Calvin was already mentally spending his imaginary profits. Trevor ordered a double scotch and downed it in one gulp. Above the bar, a large flat-screen television was playing the news. The volume was low, drowned out by the ambient lounge music, but the image was crisp. Trevor was trying to signal the bartender for another drink when he felt a strange stillness settle over the room. A few people at the nearby tables stopped talking. They were looking up at the TV. Trevor followed their gaze. The screen was split. On the left was a news anchor. On the right was a video feed. It was a courtroom. It was grand, with high ceilings and wood paneling, and in the center of the frame, wearing a black robe, holding a gavel, and looking like the angel of death, was Ruby. The chyron at the bottom of the screen was bright red. Breaking news. Youngest federal judge sworn in at Riverside District. Trevor froze, the glass in his hand tilted, spilling scotch onto his linen pants. But he did not feel the cold liquid. He stared at the words. Federal judge, Riverside District. His brain, usually quick to calculate odds, ground to a halt. Riverside. That was where his firm was headquartered. That was where his shell companies were registered. That was where the RFC filed their complaints. He looked at Ruby's face on the screen. She was not smiling. She was looking directly into the camera. Her eyes were cold. They were sharp. They were the eyes of someone who hunts predators. Hey, Simone squealed, oblivious to the atmosphere. Look, it is Ruby. Oh my God. She looks so serious. Look at that hair. I told her to get highlights. Calvin looked up from his phone, where he had been pulling up his banking app. He squinted at the screen. Well, look at that, Calvin said, chuckling. She actually went through with it. Federal judge. Sounds fancy. Shame the pay is garbage. But Trevor was not laughing. He watched the footage loop. He saw the camera pan to the empty chairs. He saw Ruby strike the gavel. Bang! A cold terror, deeper and darker than anything he had felt from the text message, began to uncoil in his gut. Federal judges signed warrants. Federal judges authorized wiretaps. Federal judges presided over fraud cases. He looked at Calvin, who was about to transfer his life savings into a black hole. He looked at Simone, who was posing with a bag bought with stolen money. Trevor, Loretta asked, noticing his expression. Honey, are you all right? You are sweating again. Trevor could not speak. He could not breathe. The words on the screen seemed to grow larger. Judge Ruby Bryant. He realized, with a clarity that made his knees buckle, that he was not just stealing from his in-laws. He was stealing from the parents of a federal magistrate in his own jurisdiction. He had thought Ruby was a clerk. He had thought she was a nobody. He looked back at the screen. Ruby's image seemed to stare right back at him. Through the pixels, through the miles, through his sunglasses. Tick-tock, the text had said. Trevor felt the room spin. He grabbed the counter to steady himself. I need to use the restroom, he whispered. He did not wait for an answer. He turned and walked away, his steps fast and uneven, leaving his family to admire the woman they had abandoned, unaware that she was the only thing standing between them and the abyss he had just opened. Monday morning in the chambers of a federal judge is usually a time of quiet administrative preparation. The air in my office was still settling, smelling faintly of the lemon polish the cleaning crew used over the weekend and the distinct dusty vanilla scent of the leather-bound case reporters that lined my shelves. I had been a judge for exactly 72 hours. I had not yet heard a single motion. I had not yet presided over a trial. I was still learning which key opened the bottom drawer of my desk. At 8:15 in the morning, my judicial assistant, a sharp woman named Elena, who had served the previous occupant of this office for 20 years, buzzed my intercom. "Judge," she said, her voice clipped. "Assistant United States Attorney Marcus Hale is here. He says it is urgent. He has a warrant application that needs immediate review. He asked for you specifically." "Send him in," I said. I adjusted the collar of my blouse. I did not put on my robe. This was chambers work. Procedural. Routine. Or so I thought. Marcus Hale walked in. I knew him from my days as a prosecutor. He was a good attorney, methodical and risk-averse, the kind of man who ironed his socks. But today, he looked rattled. He was carrying a red expandable file folder, the kind used for sensitive, sealed indictments. He closed the heavy door behind him and did not sit down. "Good morning, Judge Bryant," he said. He did not smile. He did not offer congratulations on my swearing in. "I apologize for the intrusion, but time is of the essence. We have a flight risk situation involving significant asset dissipation." "Go ahead, Marcus," I said, gesturing to the desk. He placed the red folder in front of me. Stamped across the front in black ink were the words, "Sealed. Investigation Langford." The name did not register immediately. My brain was in work mode, and Langford was a common enough surname. I opened the file. The first page was an affidavit from a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I began to scan the paragraphs, my eyes moving efficiently over the legal boilerplate to find the probable cause. Subject Trevor James Langford. Entity Langford Ridge Capital. LLC. Nature of offense wire fraud. Securities fraud. Money laundering. The world seemed to tilt on its axis by a fraction of a degree. I stopped breathing for a second, then forced my lungs to expand. I looked up at Hale. He was watching me closely, his face a mask of professional discomfort. He knew. Of course he knew. The FBI vetted everyone. He knew exactly who Trevor Langford was to me. "Is this a joke, Marcus?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "I wish it were, Your Honor," he said. "The Bureau has been tracking the accounts for 6 months. We thought it was a standard hedge fund operation until last week. The returns he is reporting are mathematically impossible. It is a Ponzi scheme. Judge, a classic, textbook pyramid. He is paying old investors with new money." I looked back down at the page. The numbers were staggering. $50 million in liabilities, $7 million in liquid assets. The rest was gone. Spent on private jets, villas in Italy, and vintage Cartier necklaces. "Why is this on my desk?" I asked. "You know the relationship. This is a conflict." "It is," Hale admitted. "And under normal circumstances, I would have taken this to Judge Morales or Chief Judge Harrison, but Harrison is in DRC for a conference, and Morales is in the middle of a jury deliberation and cannot be disturbed. You are the duty magistrate for warrants this morning, and we have triggered a tripwire." "What tripwire?" "He is moving money," Hale said. "Fast. 10 minutes ago, our forensic accountants flagged a series of wire transfers initiated from the resort in California. He is draining the operating accounts. He is moving cash to the Cayman Islands. If we do not freeze the accounts and execute the search warrant within the hour, the money will be gone. We need a signature, now." I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It was not panic. It was a strange detachment. I was watching my family's life disintegrate on a piece of bond paper. "Show me the victim list," I said. Hale hesitated. "Judge, You do not need to see that to find probable cause. The forensic analysis of the flows is sufficient. Show me the list. Marcus, I repeated. It was an order. He reached into the folder and pulled out a spreadsheet marked Exhibit C. He slid it across the mahogany desk. It was a long list. There were pension funds for a local teachers' union. There was a Baptist church in Oregon that had invested its building fund. There were small business owners, and there, near the top of the list, sorted by the date of the most recent contribution, were the names Calvin and Loretta Bryant. My eyes tracked across the row to the column labeled Principal Investment. I expected to see $10,000, maybe 20. My parents were comfortable, but they were frugal with their own money, or so I had always believed. They hoarded their cash while spending their emotional energy on appearances. The number on the page was $450,000. I stared at it. I blinked, sure that I had misread a decimal point, but the number remained. $450,000. Date of transfer, I read aloud. Yesterday. Yes, Hale said softly. It looks like a bridge loan, high interest, short term. I closed my eyes for a brief second. That was the house. That was the Maple Crest house. They had refinanced. They had taken every cent of equity they had built up over 40 years, the house I grew up in, the house they claimed they wanted to leave to their grandchildren, and they had wired it to a criminal because he promised them a quick return. They had liquidated their safety net. They had liquidated their lives, and they had done it while lying by a pool, ignoring my swearing in. I remembered my father's voice on the phone. Ruby has the degrees. Simone has the future. This was the future. A spreadsheet in a federal indictment. I opened my eyes. They cashed out their retirement accounts too, I noted, pointing to a second transaction. Another $80,000. It appears so, Hale said. They are destitute, I said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. As of this moment, they own nothing. If the transfers go through to the Caymans, Hale said, recovery is unlikely. We might get pennies on the dollar in 5 years. But if we freeze it now, we might be able to claw some of it back. Maybe. He paused, then cleared his throat. Judge, I have to formally advise you. Title 28, United States Code, Section 455. You are required to disqualify yourself in any proceeding in which your impartiality might reasonably be questioned. You are related to a victim and by marriage to the target. I know the statute. Mr. Hale, I snapped. However, he continued, pressing on, the rule of necessity applies here, in an emergency, where immediate judicial action is required to prevent irreparable harm in this case. The loss of millions of dollars of victim assets, a judge may take a ministerial action to preserve the status quo before recusing herself. You can sign the freeze order and the search warrant, but you have to hand the case over immediately after. I looked at the warrant application. It was a thick document. It authorized the FBI to raid the offices of Langford Ridge Capital. It authorized the seizure of computers, phones, and physical files. It authorized the arrest of Trevor Langford. I picked up my pen. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen I had bought for myself as a gift when I got the nomination. I looked at the signature line. Just a government job. That is what my mother had said. It is just a government thing. They thought my work was bureaucratic paper pushing. They thought I was a glorified clerk. They thought power looked like a black credit card and a suite at a resort. They were wrong. Power was not spending money. Power was the authority to stop money from moving. Power was the ability to take a man who thought he was a god and turn him into a defendant. Trevor Langford had charmed my parents. He had dazzled them with lies. He had turned them against me, made them view my hard-earned success as a consolation prize. And now, the only person in the world who could save the last scraps of their dignity, the only person who could stop Trevor from disappearing with their entire existence, was the daughter they had left behind. I felt a crack running through the center of my composure. It was a jagged line of grief. I wanted to cry for the parents I wished I had. I wanted to scream at the parents I actually had. I wanted to call them and scream, "You fools! You absolute, greedy fools!" But Judge Ruby Bryant did not scream. Judge Ruby Bryant did not cry. Judge Ruby Bryant followed the procedure. "This is not revenge," I whispered to myself. The room was so quiet that Hale might have heard me, but he gave no sign. "This is the process." I uncapped the pen. The nib was black and sharp. "I am finding probable cause," I said aloud, my voice steady, reciting the necessary litany for the record. "Based on the affidavit provided by Special Agent Miller, I find there is sufficient evidence to believe that crimes have been committed and that evidence of said crimes is located at the premises listed." I signed my name, Ruby A. Bryant, United States District Judge. The ink was dark and permanent. I flipped to the next page, the asset freeze order. "I am also finding that exigent circumstances exist to warrant an immediate freeze of all assets controlled by the target to prevent dissipation," I said. I signed again. I flipped to the arrest warrant. "And I am authorizing the arrest of Trevor James Langford." I signed the third time. I closed the folder. The sound of the heavy cardboard cover slapping shut echoed in the room. It sounded like a cell door closing. I handed the red folder back to Hale. "The warrants are live," I said. "Execute them." "And Mr. Hale?" "Yes, Judge," he asked, taking the file. "I am hereby recusing myself from all further proceedings in this matter," I said. "You will take this file to the clerk of court immediately and have it reassigned to Judge Morales. Tell him I found probable cause for the initial warrants due to the emergency nature of the dissipation, but that I have a direct conflict for the trial. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear, Your Honor," Hale said. He looked at me with a new expression. It was not just professional respect. It was something bordering on awe. He understood what it had cost me to sign those papers. He understood that I had just signed the death warrant of my own family's happiness. "Thank you, Judge," he said. "We will move immediately." He turned and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. I was alone again. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the empty space on my desk where the red folder had been. My hands were on the armrests of my chair. I gripped the leather until my knuckles turned white. It was done. The mechanism was in motion. Within minutes, agents in California and agents here in the city would be moving. Computers would be seized. Bank accounts would lock up. The black card on the table at the Azure Cliffs Resort would be declined. And then, the phones would start ringing. My parents would be confused at first. They would think it was a mistake. Then they would be angry. Then, when the reality set in, when the FBI agents explained that the money they wired yesterday was gone, they would be terrified. And who would they call? They would not call Trevor. Trevor would be in handcuffs. They would call the government employee. They would call the daughter they mocked. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out my personal cell phone. It was currently silent. The screen was dark. I looked at it for a second. Then, I placed it face down on the far corner of the desk. Let it ring. The red file folder was gone, taken by Assistant United States Attorney Hale to be processed by the clerk of court, but the ghost of its contents still lay heavy on my mahogany desk. The office was dead silent. The air conditioning had cycled off, leaving a heavy, pressurized stillness that felt like the atmosphere before a tornado touches down. I stared at my personal cell phone. It sat face down on the corner of the desk, its black case blending in with the dark wood. Strictly speaking, I should not make this call. Strictly speaking, the investigation was sealed. The warrants were live, and any communication with the targets or the victims could be construed as interference. But I was not just a federal judge. I was a human being who had watched her parents dismantle their entire existence in a spreadsheet, and I knew that Trevor Langford was not done with them. The file Hale showed me detailed a pattern when the walls start closing in. Trevor does not just run. He scrapes the bowl. He bleeds his victims dry for one last influx of cash to fund his escape. I knew, with a sick, sinking certainty, that he was pushing them for more. The $450,000 from the house was yesterday. Today, he would be asking for the bridge loan. He would be asking for the liquid cash. He would be asking for the blood. I looked at the clock. It was midnight here in the city, in California. It was 9 o'clock in the evening. They would be at dinner. They would be drunk. I picked up the phone. My hand felt cold. I dialed my father's cell number. It rang. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. I almost hoped he would not answer. If he did not answer, I could tell myself I tried. I could wash my hands of it. Hello? The voice was loud, distorted by wind and what sounded like a live calypso band. He was not just happy, he was euphoric. I could hear the slur in his vowels, the loose, unguarded cadence of a man who has had 3 scotches too many. "Dad," I said. My voice was tight. "It is Ruby." "Ruby," he bellowed. I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Loretta, look, it is the judge. The Honorable Ruby has descended from Mount Olympus to call us commoners." I heard my mother laugh in the background. A shrill, tinkling sound. "Ask her if she is having fun with her paperwork," she shouted. "We are having a blast, Ruby," my father said into the phone, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, boozy whisper. "You have no idea. This place, it is paradise. And your brother-in-law, the man is a magician, a literal magician." "Dad, listen to me," I said, cutting him off. I gripped the phone tighter. "I need you to step away from the table. I need you to go somewhere quiet, right now." "What? I cannot hear you," he said. "We are at the beach bar. Trevor just ordered a round of something blue. It is on fire. Ruby. The drink is on fire." "Dad," I snapped. I used the voice I used in the courtroom when a defense attorney was out of line. It was sharp, authoritative, and loud enough to cut through the alcohol haze. "Move! Now!" There was a pause, the shuffling sound of a phone being moved, footsteps crunching on what sounded like gravel or sand. The music faded slightly, though the bass still thumped in the background like a distant headache. Okay, he grumbled. "I am by the towel station. What is the matter with you? You sound intense. Did you lose your gavel?" "Dad," I said, forcing myself to speak slowly, "I am going to say this once. Do not sign anything else. Do not transfer any more money to Trevor. Not a dime. Not a penny." He laughed. It was a dismissive, pitying chuckle. "Oh, Ruby," he sighed. "Is that what this is about? You are worried about our finances. That is cute, really, but you are a little late to the party. We are playing in the big leagues now." "I am serious." "Dad," I said, "this is not a game. I am telling you, as your daughter and as a federal judge, you need to stop. Whatever he is selling you, whatever opportunity he pitched you today, it is a lie." "A lie." Calvin's voice hardened. The alcohol-fueled joy evaporated, replaced by the defensive aggression he always showed when I challenged his intelligence. "You think you know everything, don't you? Just because you got a robe and a government salary, you think you understand how the world works? This is finance, Ruby, high-level private equity. It is not your little traffic court. It is a federal court." "Dad," I corrected him, though I knew it didn't matter. "And I know exactly how this works. I know about the bridge fund. I know about the 200% return he promised you." There was a silence on the other end, a sharp intake of breath. "How do you know about that?" he asked. "That is an insider deal, strictly confidential." "Did Simone tell you?" "Simone did not tell me," I said. "I know because it is a classic setup. Dad, listen to me very carefully. Trevor Langford is currently the subject of a federal investigation." I said the words clearly. Federal investigation. I waited for the shock. I waited for the fear. I waited for him to ask me what to do. Instead, he snorted. "An investigation?" He scoffed. "Please, everyone in this tax bracket gets investigated. Ruby, it is the cost of doing business. The SEC, the IRS, they are just mosquitoes. Trevor told us all about it. He said he has some compliance auditors looking at his books because he is making too much money. They are jealous, just like you." The accusation hit me in the chest like a physical blow. "Jealous," I whispered. "Yes, jealous," he shouted. His voice was rising now, attracting attention on his end. "I was sure. You have always been like this. You cannot stand that Simone won. You cannot stand that she got the rich guy, the fun life, the easy road. You have been grinding away for 12 years, destroying your eyes with books, and she walks into a room and gets handed the world. And now that your mother and I finally have a piece of that pie, you want to ruin it. I am trying to save you, I yelled back, my composure cracking. I am trying to save your house. I know you refinanced the house, Dad. I know you emptied the retirement accounts. It is called leverage, misgovernment. He spat the nickname like a curse. It is called making your money work for you, something you would know nothing about with your fixed salary. We are going to double our net worth in 48 hours. Double it. Do you know what that means? It means I do not have to worry about my nursing home. It means your mother can buy whatever she wants. It means we are free. It means you are broke, I said, my voice trembling with frustration. There is no deal, Dad. There is no bridge fund. There is no tech merger. It is a Ponzi scheme. He is taking your money to pay off the people he robbed last month. He is about to run. You are lying, he said. You are a liar. You are just trying to scare me because you want us to be miserable like you. You want us to sit in the front row of your boring ceremony and clap for your little hammer. Well, guess what? We chose the champagne, and we chose the winner. Dad, I pleaded, tears stinging the corners of my eyes for the first time in years. Please, I am begging you, do not send the money. Tell me you have not sent the money yet. He went quiet. The silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. I could hear the ocean waves crashing in the distance on his end. I could hear the faint sound of Simone laughing at the bar. You really think you are smarter than him, don't you? Calvin said softly. You think you are the only one who can succeed. Did you send the money, Dad? I asked. 10 minutes ago, he said. The words were delivered with a smug, final satisfaction. We signed the papers on his tablet. We wired the funds from the new account. It is done. The confirmation came through before I picked up the phone. I closed my eyes. 10 minutes. If I had called 10 minutes earlier, if I had broken protocol the second Hale walked out, if I had not taken that moment to stare at the wall. But deep down, I knew it would not have mattered. If I had called 10 minutes ago, he would have hung up on me. He would have signed it anyway, just to spite me. He would have pressed the button just to prove that he trusted the man with the black card more than the daughter with the law degree. It is gone, Dad, I said. My voice was no longer angry. It was hollow. It is all gone. You will see, he said, his confidence wavering slightly for the first time, unsettled by my tone. On Tuesday, when the returns hit, you will see. And when we buy a vacation home in Italy, maybe we will let you stay in the guest house, if you apologize. There is no guest house, I said, and there is no Tuesday. Stop it, he snapped. I am going back to the party. Trevor ordered lobster. Do not call again unless you have something nice to say. Goodbye, Ruby. Goodbye, Dad, I whispered. He hung up. The line clicked and went dead. I slowly lowered the phone from my ear. I looked at the screen. The call had lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. In that time, my inheritance, my parents' security, and the home I grew up in had been vaporized. I stood up. I walked to the window of my chambers. From the 10th floor, I could see the street below. The city was a grid of yellow lights and deep shadows. I looked toward the east, toward the location of the FBI field office. As I watched, I saw a convoy of dark SUVs pull out of the underground garage. Their lights were off, but I recognized the silhouette of the vehicles. They were moving in formation. They were heading for the airport. They were heading for the private hangar where Langford Ridge Capital kept its corporate jet, or where they thought it was, and another team was undoubtedly already coordinating with the Los Angeles field office to hit the resort. My father was walking back to a table of lobster and blue drinks. He was probably sitting down right now, smiling at Trevor, patting him on the back, feeling like a king. He had about 20 minutes left of that feeling, maybe 30, if the traffic was bad. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass of the window. I felt a strange sense of peace. It was a cold, jagged peace, but it was peace nonetheless. I had done my duty. I had signed the warrant to protect the public. I had made the call to protect my family. They had rejected both. I did my part, I said to the empty room. The rest is law. I turned away from the window. I went back to my desk, sat down, and pulled a fresh case file toward me. I did not turn on the news. I did not check my phone again. I picked up my pen and began to read. I would wait for the explosion, but I would not watch the fuse burn. The raid did not happen with a polite knock. It happened with the synchronized precision of a sledgehammer cracking a walnut. I was not there, of course. I was 3,000 miles away, sitting in my chambers with a cup of cold coffee, waiting for the inevitable, but I know exactly how it unfolded. I have read the incident reports. I have watched the body camera footage from the tactical team. I have memorized the timestamps. It started at 4 o'clock in the morning, Pacific Standard Time, at the Azure Cliffs Resort. The luxury that my family had idolized was stripped away by the harsh, utilitarian beam of floodlights. Trevor Langford was attempting to leave. He was not checking out. He was fleeing. The footage shows him moving through the underground parking structure of the resort. He had abandoned the confident strut of the venture capitalist. He was hunched over, wearing a hoodie and dark glasses, dragging a large Louis Vuitton suitcase that contained $300,000 in cash, a pouch of uncut diamonds, and 6 encrypted hard drives. He was heading toward a rental car he had booked under a false name, planning to drive to a private airfield in Mexico. He reached the car. He opened the trunk. He lifted the suitcase. Then, the world turned white. Federal agents dropped the bag. "Show me your hands." The command roared from a bullhorn, bouncing off the concrete walls of the garage, magnified until it sounded like the voice of God. Trevor froze. For a split second, the arrogance that had defined his life tried to assert itself. He did not drop the bag. He squinted into the blinding LED lights of the tactical vehicles blocking the exit ramp and opened his mouth. "Do you know who I am?" he shouted. "I am a managing partner. You cannot touch me." The response was kinetic. 2 agents in tactical gear broke from the shadows. They did not debate jurisdiction. They did not ask for his business card. They hit him with the force of a freight train. Trevor Langford, the man who treated waitstaff like furniture and laws like suggestions, hit the concrete face first. The sound of the impact was sickeningly dull. The suitcase skidded across the floor. "Hands behind your back. Stop resisting." "I am not resisting," Trevor screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched squeal as the cold steel of the handcuffs bit into his wrists. "My father-in-law is an investor. I have rights. I have money." "You have the right to remain silent," an agent said, hauling him to his feet by the back of his hoodie. "I suggest you use it." Upstairs, in the presidential suite, the scene was less tactical but equally chaotic. Simone was standing in the doorway of the bedroom, wearing a silk robe, watching agents swarm the living area. She was not running. She was frozen in a state of infantile regression. She was screaming, but she was not screaming for a lawyer. "Mom! Dad!" she wailed, her hands clutching the lapels of her robe. "Make them stop. They are ruining the vacation. Tell them who Trevor is." She truly believed that her parents had the power to dismiss the Federal Bureau of Investigation like they were rude hotel staff. She looked around for Calvin and Loretta, expecting them to fix it, to write a check, to make the bad men go away. But Calvin and Loretta could not fix anything. Simultaneously, 3,000 miles away in Maple Crest, the second arm of the operation was swinging the hammer. My parents were not home, but their house, the sanctuary of their middle-class pride, was under siege. The prompt raid was necessary to secure physical records before Trevor's associates could purge them. It was 7 o'clock in the morning in the suburbs. The sun was just rising over the manicured lawns. The neighbors, the people my mother had spent 40 years trying to impress, were waking up to get their newspapers. Instead, they got a show. A convoy of unmarked sedans and a raid van idled in the driveway. Agents in windbreakers with FBI emblazoned in yellow letters were carrying boxes out of the front door. They carried out my father's desktop computer. They carried out the filing cabinets where my mother kept her tax returns. They carried out the safe from the master bedroom. The neighbors were not looking away out of respect. They were standing on their porches. They were holding up their smartphones. The curtains in the houses across the street were twitching as people zoomed in to record the downfall of the Bryant family. The digital eyes of the neighborhood were wide open, capturing every second of the humiliation. Back at the resort, agents had breached my parents' suite. Loretta was cornered near the minibar. An agent was bagging her iPad and my father's laptop, the very devices they had used to wire their life savings away 10 minutes prior. "You cannot take that," Loretta shrieked. She lunged for the tablet, her face twisted in a mask of panic. "Those are my investment papers. That is the proof we are partners. We are part of the bridge fund." "Ma'am, step back," the agent said, blocking her with a forearm. "This is evidence of wire fraud." "It is not fraud," she yelled, her voice echoing in the hallway, audible to every guest on the floor. "It is a deal. We are going to be rich. Ask Trevor. Ask my son-in-law." "Your son-in-law is in custody, ma'am," the agent said, his voice flat. "And the accounts have been frozen." Calvin was sitting on the edge of the bed, wearing his hotel bathrobe. He looked small. He looked deflated. He was staring at the agent who had just told him the news. "Frozen," Calvin whispered. "What do you mean, frozen?" "I mean the money you wired is gone, sir," the agent said. "It hit the Shell account and was flagged for seizure. It is government property now pending litigation. You are not an investor. Mr. Bryant, you are a victim and potentially a suspect until we clear you of collusion." "But the house," Calvin stammered. "We leveraged the house." "I would suggest you call a lawyer," the agent said, turning away to tag a bag of evidence. By 8 o'clock in the morning, the story broke. It was not on page 6. It was the lead. I sat in my office and watched the local news feed on my monitor. The chyron was bright red, scrolling across the bottom of the screen with relentless speed. Financial scandal rocks district. Parents of newly sworn-in federal judge Ruby Bryant under scrutiny in Ponzi scheme investigation. The reporter was standing on the sidewalk in front of the Maple Crest house. Behind her, agents were loading the last of the boxes. "Sources tell us that Trevor Langford, the brother-in-law of Judge Bryant, orchestrated a $50 million fraud," the reporter said, looking grave. "Federal agents raided the home of Calvin and Loretta Bryant this morning. Questions are swirling about how much the judge knew and why her parents were seemingly heavily invested in the scheme." They showed the clip, the one from yesterday, the photo of me walking past the empty chairs. Then they cut to a new clip, a shaky cell phone video taken by a tourist at the Azure Cliffs Resort. It showed Trevor being dragged into a federal vehicle, screaming about his rights. It showed Simone weeping on the curb, and in the background, it showed my father, Calvin Bryant, being escorted out of the lobby, looking like a man who had just woken up from a dream to find himself in a burning building. My office phone remained silent. I had instructed my clerks to hold all calls. But my personal cell phone, lying face down on the desk, began to move. Psst. It vibrated against the hard wood. It sounded like an angry insect trapped in a jar. I looked at it. I did not need to turn it over to know who it was. Mom, Dad, Simone, Mom, Dad. They were calling. They were calling the daughter they had ignored. They were calling the government worker. They were calling the woman whose swearing in was too boring to attend. They were panicking. They were realizing that the bridge fund was a bridge to nowhere. They were realizing that the neighbors had seen everything. They were realizing that they were stranded at a luxury resort with credit cards that no longer worked and a bill they could not pay. I reached out. My hand hovered over the phone. I could pick up. I could say, "I told you so." I could scream at them. I could tell them that I warned them, that I tried to save them, that they chose this. But I remembered the gavel. I remembered the sound it made when I struck it yesterday. Crack. The time for talking was over. The verdict had been delivered. I did not answer. I reached out and pressed the volume button on the side of the phone until the vibration stopped. I turned the device completely off. I picked up my pen and pulled the next case file toward me. The room was silent again. Outside, the city was waking up to the news of my family's disgrace. But inside these four walls, there was only the law, and the law did not take calls from people who had already signed their own confessions. The noise began in the atrium of the courthouse shortly after 10 o'clock in the morning. I was in my chambers, reviewing a motion for summary judgment on a patent case, trying to force my brain to focus on intellectual property law rather than the implosion of my personal life. The sound was distinct. The federal courthouse is generally a place of hushed tones and respectful murmurs. Attorneys speak in low voices. Defendants walk with their heads down. But this noise was discordant. It was the high-pitched, frantic entitlement of people who believe the rules do not apply to them. I am telling you, my daughter is the judge. The voice echoed up the marble staircase. It was my father. Sir, you need to step back from the metal detector, a security officer's voice replied, firm and patient. I do not need to step back, Calvin shouted. I am Calvin Bryant. Judge Bryant is my daughter. She works here. She runs this place. You call her down here right now. Tell her family is here. Tell her it is an emergency. Sir, if you do not lower your voice, I will have you removed from the building. You cannot remove me. I am the father of a federal judge. I closed the case file in front of me. I looked at Marshal Vance, who was standing by my door. He had been waiting for this. We both knew they would come. They had no money for a hotel, no access to their accounts, and nowhere else to go. They had come to the only source of authority they had left, hoping to leverage my name one last time. Shall I have them removed, Your Honor? Vance asked quietly. I stood up. I reached for my robe. I pulled the heavy black silk over my shoulders, zipping it up to the chin. It was a shield. It hid the daughter. It presented only the magistrate. No, I said. Bring them to Holding Room B. I will meet them there. Vance raised an eyebrow. Holding Room B was not a conference room. It was not the comfortable witness waiting area with the plush sofas and the coffee machine. Holding Room B was a small, windowless box on the ground floor used for attorney-client meetings with defendants who were in custody but not yet processed. It had white cinder-block walls, a linoleum floor that smelled of bleach, and 4 plastic chairs bolted to the ground. Are you sure? Judge Vance asked. I am sure, I said. And Marshal, I want a detail with me. I do not want to walk into that room alone. Understood. I walked out of my chambers and toward the elevator. 2 more marshals fell in step behind me. We descended to the lobby level. When the elevator doors opened, the scene was pathetic. My family was clustered near the security checkpoint. They looked nothing like the glossy, tanned figures from the photo at the Azure Cliffs Resort. They looked like refugees from a disaster of their own making. My father was wearing the same linen shirt he had worn to the brunch, but it was now wrinkled and stained with sweat. My mother's face was devoid of makeup, her eyes puffy and red, her hair pulled back in a severe, messy knot. Simone was wearing a tracksuit and clutching one of the Birkin bags Trevor had bought with stolen money, hugging it to her chest like a life preserver. They were arguing with 3 security guards. A line of attorneys and citizens was backing up behind them, watching the spectacle with a mixture of annoyance and amusement. Ruby? My mother saw me first. Her voice cracked across the lobby. Ruby, thank God. Tell these idiots who we are. I did not smile. I did not wave. I walked toward them with the marshals flanking me. The sound of my heels on the marble floor was rhythmic and sharp. As I approached, the crowd fell silent. The attorneys in line recognized me. They nudged each other. That is Judge Bryant. That is her family. I stopped 10 feet away from them. I did not cross the security barrier. Marshal Vance, I said, my voice projecting clearly in the sudden silence. Please escort these individuals to Holding Room B. They are disrupting the operations of the court. Calvin's mouth fell open. Escort disrupted Ruby. We are your parents. We need to go to your office. We need to sit down. We need water. Holding room B, I repeated, looking at Vance, not at my father. Right this way, Vance said, stepping forward and gesturing with a gloved hand. Move along, now. They were too stunned to argue. The sight of me in the robe, surrounded by armed federal agents, stripped away their bluster. They followed Vance like sheep, heads down, shuffling through the side door that led to the secure corridors. I waited a moment, letting them get ahead. Then I followed. When I entered holding room B, the door clicked shut behind me and locked automatically. Vance stood with his back to the door, arms crossed. The room was cold. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed with a low, irritating buzz. My mother was standing in the middle of the room. When she saw me, her face crumpled. She lunged forward, her arms open, desperate for physical contact, desperate to be held and told that everything was a bad dream. "Oh, Ruby, baby," she sobbed. "It is a nightmare. You have to help us." She was 3 feet away when I raised my hand, palm out, fingers spread, a stop sign. "Do not touch me," I said. The words were not shouted. They were spoken with the same flat, sterile intonation I used to sustain an objection. My mother froze. She looked at my hand, then at my face. She looked as if I had slapped her. "Ruby," she whispered, "I am your mother. You are a witness," I said, "and potentially a subject of a federal investigation, and I am a United States District Judge. Whatever physical comfort you are looking for, you will not find it here." I walked past her and sat in the single plastic chair on the far side of the metal table. I gestured to the 3 chairs opposite me. "Sit," I commanded. They sat. They looked small and frightened. The arrogance of the resort, the pride of the investment, the smug superiority of the champagne toast, it was all gone, dissolved by the reality of fluorescent lights and cinder blocks. "They took everything," Calvin said. His voice was trembling. "The house, the computers, the accounts, Ruby? They froze the accounts. We tried to buy breakfast at the airport and the card was declined. We had to use the cash in your mother's purse just to get a taxi here. The accounts are frozen because they contain the proceeds of criminal activity," I said. "It was an investment," Calvin insisted, though the conviction was gone from his voice. "Trevor said it was a bridge fund. We were supposed to get 200% back on Tuesday." "There is no bridge fund," I said. "There is no Tuesday. I told you that on the phone." "But Trevor," Simone whimpered. She was picking at the leather of her $20,000 bag. "He is in jail. Ruby, they arrested him. They put him in handcuffs like a common criminal. You have to get him out. You are a judge. You can sign a paper. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them he's good for it." I looked at my sister. She was 30 years old, yet she sounded like a teenager asking for her phone back. "I cannot get him out," I said. "Trevor is facing charges of wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. The evidence is overwhelming. He did not just lose money. Simone, he stole it. He stole from pension funds. He stole from churches. And he stole from our parents." "He did not mean to," Simone cried. "He was stressed. He was trying to fix things. He was trying to flee to a non-extradition country with diamonds in a suitcase." I corrected her. "That is not stress. That is consciousness of guilt." "Ruby, please," my mother begged. She leaned forward, clutching her hands together. "Forget Trevor. We do not care about Trevor. We care about us. The house. They put a seal on the door. They said we cannot go back in. Where are we supposed to sleep? We have no money. We have no clothes." She looked at me with wide, expectant eyes. This was the moment. This was the moment in the script where the dutiful, boring daughter steps in. This was where I was supposed to open my checkbook. This was where I was supposed to say, "Come stay with me. I will fix it." I looked at them. I looked at the people who had told me my career was just a government thing. I looked at the people who had chosen a spa day over my swearing in. I looked at the people who had mocked my salary while handing their life savings to a con man. I reached into the pocket of my robe. I pulled out a white business envelope. It was sealed. I slid it across the metal table. Calvin looked at it. A spark of hope lit up his eyes. He thought it was a check. He thought it was a key to my apartment. He snatched it up and tore it open with shaking fingers. He pulled out the contents. 2 business cards fell onto the table. He stared at them. He flipped them over. He looked up at me, confused. "What is this?" he asked. "The first card," I said, pointing to the blue one, "is for Marcus Thorne. He is the best bankruptcy attorney in the state. I spoke to him this morning. He specializes in Chapter 7 filings for victims of fraud. He can help you navigate the foreclosure of the Maple Crest house and shield your Social Security checks from the creditors." "Bankruptcy," my father whispered. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. "But our reputation. Your reputation was destroyed the moment you wired that money," I said brutally. "The second card is for a financial advisor who works with indigent seniors. He can help you budget your government benefits so you can afford an apartment." "An apartment?" my mother gasped. "Ruby, we live in a 4-bedroom colonial." "You lived in a 4-bedroom colonial," I corrected. "Now you are homeless, and you are broke." "But you have money," Simone said, looking at me with accusation. "You have a salary. You have an apartment. You can take us in." "Just until we get back on our feet." I stood up. The sound of the plastic chair scraping against the floor was loud. "No," I said. The word hung in the air. "No," my mother repeated. "What do you mean?" "No." "I mean no," I said. "I will not take you in. I will not pay your debts. I will not bail out your husband, Simone, and I will certainly not intervene in a federal case." "But we are family," Calvin shouted, standing up to match me. "You owe us. We raised you. You raised an investment," I said, cold as ice. "And when you thought that investment did not pay out high enough returns, you diversified. You bet everything on Trevor. You bet your house. You bet your respect. You bet your relationship with me." I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. "I signed the warrant, Dad." The room went dead silent. The buzzing of the lights seemed to get louder. "What?" Calvin whispered. "The warrant," I said. "The search warrant for the house. The arrest warrant for Trevor. The freeze order on your accounts. I signed them." My mother put her hand over her mouth. Simone gasped. Calvin looked as if I had stabbed him. "You," he choked out. "You did this to us." "I did my job," I said. "I reviewed the evidence. I saw the fraud, and I stopped him before he could steal more. I tried to warn you. I called you. I begged you not to send the money. You laughed at me. You told me to enjoy my little hammer. You told me I was jealous." I straightened up, smoothing the front of my robe. "I am not jealous, Dad. I am the law. And the law says that when you give your money to a criminal, you lose it." I pointed to the envelope on the table. "I have paid the retainer for 1 hour of consultation with Mr. Thorne. 1 hour. After that, his fees are your responsibility. I suggest you use that hour wisely. Ask him about credit counseling. Ask him about public housing lists." "You cannot leave us here," my mother sobbed. "Ruby, please, we have nowhere to go." "There is a shelter 3 blocks over on 4th Street, I said. "They take intakes until 5 o'clock. I turned toward the door. "Ruby," Calvin screamed, "if you walk out that door, you are no daughter of mine." I stopped. My hand was on the doorknob. I did not turn around. "I think we established that when you left 4 empty chairs at my swearing-in," I said. "You wanted a government worker. You got one. This is what government work looks like." I opened the door. Marshal Vance stepped aside to let me pass. "Keep them here for another 10 minutes. I told Vance. "Then escort them out of the building. If they return, arrest them for trespassing." "Yes, Your Honor." I walked out into the hallway. I heard my mother wailing behind me. I heard my father cursing my name. I heard Simone crying for Trevor. I did not slow down. I walked back toward the elevator, my robe billowing slightly behind me. My chest felt light. the heavy weight of obligation, the years of trying to be good enough, the decades of seeking their approval. It was all gone. I had cut the cord. I pressed the button for the 10th floor. The doors opened. I stepped in. As the doors slid shut, cutting off the sounds of their desperation, I finally took a deep breath. I was an orphan now, and for the first time in my life, I was free. 6 months had passed since the day the floodlights washed over the Azure Cliffs resort, and the wheels of justice, often criticized for being slow, had ground forward with terrifying, inexorable weight. I was back in a courtroom, but this time, I was not wearing the robe. I was sitting in the front row of the gallery, the wood of the bench hard against my back. I was wearing a simple gray suit. I was not there as the Honorable Ruby Bryant. I was there as a victim, and as a witness to the end of an era. The courtroom belonged to Judge Morales. He sat high above us, a man known for his patience and his severe dislike of white-collar criminals who preyed on the elderly. Trevor Langford stood at the defense table. The tan was gone. The designer suit had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He had lost 20 pounds. His hair, once gelled and coiffed, was limp and graying at the temples. He did not look like a titan of industry. He looked like what he was, a thief who had been caught. Judge Morales adjusted his glasses and looked down at the pre-sentencing report. "Mr. Langford," Morales said, his voice filling the room without the aid of a microphone. "I have reviewed the victim impact statements. I have reviewed the forensic accounting. You defrauded 42 separate entities. You destroyed the retirement savings of 30 families. And you did this to fund a lifestyle of grotesque excess." Trevor stood up. His lawyer tried to grab his arm to stop him, but Trevor shook him off. Desperation had made him bold, or perhaps just stupid. "Your Honor," Trevor said, his voice shaking, "I was trying to fix it. I just needed more time. The liquidity was coming. And honestly, if you look at the investors, specifically the Bryant family, they were begging to be part of it. They were greedy. They threw money at me because they wanted to be rich without working for it. They are not victims. They are accomplices to their own avarice." I sat perfectly still. I did not gasp. I did not turn to look at my parents, who were sitting 3 rows behind me. Judge Morales stared at Trevor. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. "Mr. Langford," Morales said, his tone dropping a full octave. "Blaming the people you manipulated is not a defense. It is a confirmation of your sociopathy. You preyed on their trust. You preyed on their family connection. That does not mitigate your sentence. It aggravates it." Morales picked up his pen. "It is the judgment of this court that you be remanded to the custody of the Bureau of Prisons for a term of 240 months. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $12 million. Your assets, including all real estate and personal property seized, are forfeited effectively immediately. 240 months, 20 years. Trevor slumped back into his chair. He looked as if his strings had been cut. The bailiffs moved in, pulling him to his feet. The handcuffs clicked shut. It was the same sound I had heard in my mind for months, but hearing it in reality brought no joy. It just brought a sense of finality. I stood up to leave. As I turned, I saw them. Calvin and Loretta were sitting near the back. My father was looking at the floor. He had aged 10 years in 6 months. His shoulders were rounded, his posture defeated. My mother was clutching a handbag. It was not the Birkin. It was a vinyl bag she must have bought at a discount store. Her knuckles were white as she squeezed the strap, as if holding on to it was the only thing keeping her from falling off the earth. They heard the sentence. They heard the forfeiture order. They knew what it meant. There would be no recovery. There would be no restitution check big enough to buy back their lives. I walked past them. I did not stop. I did not nod. My father looked up as I passed. His eyes met mine. There was no anger left in them. There was only a vast, empty regret. He opened his mouth, perhaps to say my name, perhaps to ask for $1, but I was already gone, pushing through the double doors and out into the sunlight, across town, in the suburb of Maple Crest. The physical dismantling of the Bryant legacy was taking place. I had seen the schedule. I knew that at this exact moment, the sheriff's department was executing the final eviction and seizure order. The house on Elm Street, with its manicured lawn and the fresh coat of paint my father had bragged about, was silent. A moving truck sat in the driveway, but it was not there to move them to a new villa. It was there to clear the property for auction. 2 deputies were walking up the path. One of them held a roll of tape and a bright orange notice. Seized property. United States Marshal Service. No trespassing. The deputy smoothed the sticker onto the front door. It covered the brass knocker my mother had polished every Sunday. The neighbors were watching. They were always watching. Mrs. Higgins from next door. The woman my mother had competed with for 30 years over who had the better hydrangeas, stood on her porch. She was not smiling. She was not laughing. She just watched with a grim, stony silence. It was the silence of a community that had witnessed a fall so complete that it was no longer funny. It was a social death sentence. The curtains in the windows across the street did not move. The judgment of the neighborhood was absolute. The Bryants were not just gone. They were erased, 10 miles away, in a cavernous discount supercenter. My sister Simone was clocking in for her shift. She was wearing a blue vest. On the right side of the chest, a plastic name tag was pinned crookedly to the fabric. It did not say Simone. It said trainee. She stood at register 4. The conveyor belt hummed with a relentless, mechanical drone. A customer, a woman with 3 screaming children and a cart full of frozen dinners, was piling items onto the belt. "Hurry up," the woman snapped. "My ice cream is melting." Simone did not roll her eyes. She did not make a sarcastic comment. She did not pull out her phone to text Trevor. "Yes, ma'am," Simone said softly. She picked up a box of fish sticks. She dragged it across the scanner. Beep. She picked up a bag of peas. Beep. She picked up a gallon of milk. Beep. 6 months ago, her hands had held crystal champagne flutes and the steering wheel of a convertible. Now, they were dry and chapped from handling cardboard and cheap receipts. She was no longer the girl with the future. She was employee number 4. She was the investment that had crashed. Every beep of the scanner was a reminder of the life she had been promised, and the life she was now living. She looked up at the fluorescent lights, blinking back tears, and reached for the next item. That evening, the sun set over the city, casting long shadows across the small ground-floor apartment on the south side of town. The apartment smelled of damp drywall and old cooking oil. The carpet was thin and stained. The furniture was a mismatched collection of items salvaged from thrift stores. Calvin and Loretta sat on a sagging beige sofa. They were eating dinner from paper plates. The room was dim, lit only by the flickering blue light of a 24-inch television sitting on a milk crate. The local news was on. "And finally tonight," the anchor said, her voice cheerful. "A look at the changing face of justice in our district." The image on the screen changed. It was footage from earlier that day, taken outside the courthouse. It showed me. I was walking down the courthouse steps, flanked by Marshal Vance. I looked strong. I looked unshakable. The chyron beneath my image read, "Judge Ruby Bryant, the iron gavel of the district." Judge Bryant has been praised for her efficiency and her uncompromising stance on financial crimes, the reporter said. In just 6 months, she has cleared a backlog of cases that had stalled the court for years. Legal analysts are already calling her a rising star in the federal judiciary. Calvin stopped chewing. He stared at the screen. He stared at the daughter he had dismissed as a clerk. He stared at the woman he had pitied for having a boring job. He slowly reached out. His hand, shaking slightly, touched the glass of the television screen, right over my face. "She looks tall," Loretta whispered. Her voice was thin, stripped of all its former haughtiness. "She is tall," Calvin said. His voice broke. "She is a giant." He pulled his hand back. He looked around the small, dingy room. He looked at the peeling paint on the walls. He looked at his wife, who had aged so much in the shadow of their greed. "We missed it," Calvin said softly. "Missed what?" Loretta asked, wiping her mouth with a paper napkin. "The news. The swearing in. Calvin said. Tears began to track through the deep lines on his face. We missed the swearing in. We thought it was just a ceremony. We thought it was just a government thing. He looked back at the TV. But the image had already changed to a weather report. We missed the moment she became this, he whispered. And because we missed that, we missed everything else. We are not in her life, Loretta. We are not even in the footnotes. He leaned back, closing his eyes. The realization washed over him, heavier than the debt, heavier than the shame. They had traded their daughter for a spa day, and the receipt was this silence, this apartment, and this distance that could never be bridged. The next morning, the sun streamed through the high windows of courtroom 3. The gallery was full. It was a motion hearing day, and the benches were packed with attorneys, clerks, and citizens waiting for their cases to be called. The door to the chambers opened. "All rise," the bailiff shouted. His voice was a thunderclap. 200 people stood up. The sound of their movement was like a sudden gust of wind. They stood out of respect. They stood out of obligation. They stood because the authority in the room demanded it. I walked in. I moved up the steps to the bench. My robe flowed around me, heavy and comforting. I did not look at the front row. I did not check to see if the seats reserved for family were empty or full. It did not matter. I stood behind the high desk. I looked out at the room. I saw the law. I saw the mechanism of justice that kept the world from falling into chaos. I saw my purpose. I sat down. I reached out with my right hand. My fingers closed around the handle of the gavel. It was the same gavel I had held 6 months ago, but it felt lighter now. It felt like a part of me. I did not need an audience of blood relations to make this real. I did not need my father's approval to make it valid. I did not need my mother's applause to make it worthy. I was the institution. I raised the gavel. I held it suspended for a fraction of a second, savoring the absolute silence in the room. Then, I brought it down. Crack. The sound was sharp, decisive, and final. It cut through the air, severing the last thread of the past. It was the sound of a woman who was whole, standing alone, and completely sufficient. "Call the first case," I said, and the court began its work. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below with your location and share your thoughts on whether you think Ruby made the right choice. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story get heard by more people.